Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're cracking open a truly fascinating piece of history. We're going to examine an old pamphlet from an organization known as Anand Pratishthan. And what makes this specific document so captivating is how it just masterfully blends ancient spiritual promises with the language of modern science, offering something it calls Tantra Vidya, or Tantra Science. We're going to look strictly at what this group promised, exactly how they defended their claims, and some of the highly specific and, honestly, somewhat bizarre requirements they asked of their followers. It is a fantastic look at how the marketing of wellness and mysticism really hasn't changed all that much over the centuries. Okay, let's jump right into this. The pamphlet kicks off with a hook designed to grab you instantly. Right at the very top, they promise that you will see amazing and supernatural miracles in a waking state. It's bombastic, it's bold, and it perfectly sets the stage. They aren't just pitching a subtle feeling of inner peace here, They are promising a visceral, eye-opening experience. They want the reader to know right away that this isn't your average meditation practice. This is about accessing incredible, tangible power. So, let's look at the grand claim of Tantra. You're probably wondering, what exactly is this limitless power they're talking about? Well, the pamphlet defines Tantra Shastra as a physical branch of the much greater science of Yoga Mahavidya. They describe that greater science as infinite, essentially capable of making a human almost godlike. But they readily admit that traditional paths like Ashtanga Yoga are incredibly difficult. Tantra Shastra, on the other hand, is pitched as a much more accessible stepping stone. The idea is that once you achieve mental control, this path supposedly increases your soul power, and that power allows you to influence others, even from a distance, for better or for worse. Basically, it's the promise of a shortcut to immense personal influence. Which brings us to an interesting clash: ancient power versus Western science. To make claims this massive believable, you need to build some serious authority, right? And they do this by mapping out a literal timeline of this power. First, they point to ancient times. They cite revered teachers like Garanath and even dip into Hindu mythology, claiming Lord Shiva used this exact soul power to open his third eye and burn the powerful warrior Kamadeva to ashes. Then, surprisingly, they jump straight to the 1st century, claiming that Jesus Christ healed countless sick people using this very same spiritual energy through touch and sight. Finally, they bring the whole thing into the modern era, positioning Anand Pratishthan as the current rightful inheritors of this ancient cross-cultural power, simply distributing it for public welfare. Now here's where it gets absolutely fascinating. They actually take on Western science directly. The pamphlet acknowledges that European doctors are out there using mesmerism, hypnotism, and magnetism, but they claim their Tantra Vidya is vastly superior. They argue that Western mesmerism is a gross or physical power, meaning it only works if you are sitting right in front of the person. Tantra Vidya, according to their text, operates on subtle vibrations, and these vibrations are allegedly so powerful that they can affect someone thousands of miles away, just as effectively as if they were in the exact same room, sinking deep into the patient's unconscious mind. So, with all that in mind, let's explore what's possible and what's absolutely not. With such supposedly limitless power at their fingertips, you might wonder what they actually used it for. Well, they lay down a very clear list of what is accepted and what is strictly rejected, setting some really careful boundaries around their services. On the accepted side, they claim to treat severe physical and mental illnesses, specifically calling out things like memory loss, anxiety, anger, and bad habits. They also offer to solve family disputes, infertility, and, even ghost trouble. But look at the rejected side. They explicitly state they will never perform sinful acts like Vashikran, which is mind control. They also totally refuse to engage in anything related to financial forecasting, so no lottery predictions, no locating hidden treasure, no palmistry, and no astrology. And they actually use these strict boundaries to defend their pure intentions. The pamphlet argues that they only use pure scientific and spiritual methods that are recognized by psychologists. They totally anticipate people being skeptical, and they address it head-on with a pretty simple logical defense. Since they don't demand any upfront fees or extort money, they have absolutely zero reason to deceive anyone or spread hypocrisy. They're basically saying, hey, if this were a scam, we'd be charging you for it. Okay, let's get into the mechanics of this, the mysterious healing method. If the service is entirely free, and this power works from thousands of miles away, how do you actually kick off the long-distance healing? Well, buckle up because the instructions are incredibly specific, literally ritualistic. Step 1. You've got to send your full details and the cause of the disease. Step 2. A photograph, but strictly no more than 5 years old. Step 3, and this is where it escalates, exactly 11 hairs pulled right from the crown of the head, known as the shika. And step 4, one single drop of blood taken specifically from the patient's left thumb, dripped onto blotting paper. According to the text, once they have those 4 distinct items in their possession, the distant healing begins. Now, they do offer a tiny bit of leeway here. The text notes that if the patient is a small child or a very elderly person, they get a pass on providing the drop of blood. However, the organization warns that without the blood, the success of the healing process will probably take a bit longer. It's just such a fascinating detail that really adds to the internal logic and the strict rule set of their whole practice. So, you've sent the hair and the blood. What happens next? Well, that brilliantly sets the stage for the intense physical reality they expected their followers to endure. The pamphlet warns that during the treatment, the patient will suddenly fill with extra energy. We're talking uncontrollable panting and shivering. They will witness those miraculous waking visions that were promised at the very beginning of the document. Because of this intense physical reaction, the text strongly advises having a companion present just for safety. And crucially, whatever wild visions the patient sees during this, they must be kept an absolute secret. All right, let's talk logistics, the conditions of the free service. So, after gathering the 11 hairs, the drop of blood, and the photo, what is the ultimate financial cost for all this? Well, the terms are reiterated heavily to prove their altruism. There are absolutely no upfront fees. Any medicines, herbal remedies, amulets, or spiritual shields they decide to mail out to you are sent entirely for free. The organization claims that patients are completely independent. You're totally off the hook financially. However, they do note that if a patient is fully cured and feels willing, voluntary donations are happily accepted to help the practitioners sustain their lives. But wait, there is one non-negotiable catch, and I absolutely love this historical detail. While the spiritual power, the distant healing, and the amulets are all completely free, Anand Pratishthan makes it known that they cannot bear the burden of postal charges. Therefore, every single request must include a 1 Anna stamp for return postage. Like, you can send literal blood and hair, but if you forget to include that 1 Anna stamp, they state very clearly you will not receive a reply. The whole thing wraps up by urging the reader not to miss out on the unprecedented benefits of this science, even suggesting that perhaps divine providence led them to this very document. It just leaves us with this incredible, compelling glimpse into how mystical authority and pseudoscientific structure were marketed in the past. Looking at the rigorous demands, the specific photo, the 11 hairs, the drop of blood from the left thumb, and of course that 1 Anna stamp, it asks the historical reader, and perhaps us today, a very simple question. Are you ready to test the science? Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and we'll see you next time as we keep exploring the fascinating artifacts of history.